What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the DK Garage. I'm Jeremy.
And I'm Joe.
Well, man, we have a lot to discuss on this episode today. We for sure need to set up this race at New Hampshire because there's a lot of great plays on the slate. I think some tricky plays because Atlanta was not quite how most people, I think, expected it to go. There was some that really dominated. Kyle Busch was one of them. But this episode, we definitely need to get into how it set up New Hampshire. And then silly season is in full swing. We got to touch a little bit on that. Where do you want to start this episode? Because it's chock full.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about. And I think exciting news with the silly season stuff. But I think we start at Atlanta because it really impacts on how things are getting or shaping up for the start of the race at New Hampshire, because it's back to the old metric system. So I think that's where we should start, because there were some unexpected names at the front. We got a big win from Kurt Busch, that team that really needed it.
Another first-time winner for this season.
Propelled him into the playoffs, and now the playoffs are basically almost upon us. We only have 5 races, including this weekend, to get that playoff set. And we're going to really have a lot of stuff to look at here this week, because there's a couple weeks off in between this week and the next race.
So I got to ask you, this has been a pretty crazy week for both of us. So we really haven't had much time to discuss how things went. In the end, I did have quite a bit of Kyle Busch, which was obviously a good thing to have. But I did go pretty heavy on Larson, and that really sucked. How did you end up on the Larson thing? I mean, I know a lot of people were high on him going into Atlanta for obvious reasons.
Yeah, no, there was everything was lined up, and I had a decent bit of exposure to him, but I had some Kyle Busch as well. I liked where Kyle Busch was at. I think him and that team are on a heater. We talked about it in last week's podcast, so I had more exposure there, and I did have 1 or 2 Kurt Busch lineups, which in tournament environments, that helped me break even for the weekend.
Yeah, unfortunately, I wasn't super confident in Atlanta, so I didn't go quite as heavy. I didn't have as many lineups, and didn't really use the optimizer too much, other than to get some ideas on how things would potentially price out. But in the end, I kind of hand-built a lot of them, and it was hard to – I came down to having the ability to put Kurt Busch in several, and I liked him. We were high on him. We've been high on him the last few weeks. We know that he's good. I don't think either of us, and I didn't hear anyone before Atlanta think that he would get a 115.9 points, almost a 14x value. It's not that he's not capable of it, but it's just that's not what we really have come to expect from him with this Ganassi equipment. Really, that one stung quite a bit. When you go heavy on Larson, he gets a value of 1.35, and you don't play Kurt Busch. Yeah, I got about half back or so, maybe even a little less. Not a pretty day, but I think we've learned a good little bit more. I think we kind of mentioned that, at least I did, I thought Larson and that team was pulling back a little bit, or at least the other teams were catching up to him. And he really never looked good. It was okay in the first few laps, but he never popped. What was kind of your thoughts on how some of the race played out from your point of view?
Yeah, it pretty much was the Busch brothers, it seemed like, pretty much throughout the race. And
Kyle Busch.
There you go. Rowdy energy once again. But we did talk about Hendrick potentially seeing if this might be a race where things kind of evened out, or if they were going to stay on top. And we obviously saw that things are starting to even out a little bit, with Kyle Busch there leading quite a bit, and then Kurt Busch and the Ganassi Racing team being able to get that win and lock themselves into a playoff position. It was definitely interesting, and I think this week going into New Hampshire, we could see even more of an evening out throughout these teams. I'm expecting big things from the Penske drivers and the Gibbs drivers this week, so I really think it's one of those weeks we might see Hendrick not as valued, and some of that is from recent performance.
So one of the things I kind of want to ask you, because I've pretty much every podcast or show or clip on YouTube or whatever that I've seen since Atlanta, almost everyone has had a take on the controversy at the end. And that was Ross Chastain, one of the last cars on the lead lap, Kyle Busch leading. They were running the same lines. Kurt Busch was able to get momentum, come down low, end up taking the lead and never gave it back up. I think there was, 19, 20 laps to go, something like that. A lot of people, Kyle Busch after the race was like, if you want to race like that, fine, but you got one coming. On the radio, right after he got out of the car, Kurt Busch thanked Chastain for that move. I don't know. You think that was fair? Inbounds, out of bounds. What was your take on the Chastain-Kyle Busch incident?
Shake and bake, baby. I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was fun. It was exciting. It's what the sport needs. I would be careful if I was Ross Chastain. He's going to not make very many friends that way long term. He's also looking for a ride potentially this year. But he helped his teammate out. It was fun to watch. It was exciting. I laughed whenever Kurt Busch got out of the car and said, I like Kurt Busch. I like the Busch brothers. So that added dynamic made it even that much more fun that it happened on his brother. So to me, it's just what the sport needs. It's entertainment. I loved it. I think Ross Chastain, though, will find himself maybe not in some good positions if he gets around Kyle Busch and maybe some other drivers that he ends up pissing off because he can be aggressive and he runs his own race. It's part of the sport. You are allowed to do what you want on the racetrack, but somebody might dump you for doing what you want on the racetrack. How about you? What was your take?
So I've only seen just the basic sort of angle. Didn't see any data. So I'm just kind of going off what my eyes told me, and my eyes, based on a lot of racing that I've seen in the past, you will race the leader of the race a lot harder to stay on the lead lap. With 20 laps to go, caution comes out. Ross Chastain's on the lead lap. They come in, they get tires because you're obviously going to want tires at that point. If you're the lucky dog, yeah, you get on the lead lap, but you still start in the back of the field. But at least if you are on the lead lap, caution comes out, you can pit, you can potentially move up, maybe even gamble, go 2 tires there. A lot of things could happen with that many laps to go. And then you also, I think, have to factor in the fact that his teammate was in second and had one of the best, if not the best cars up to that point in the race. I don't really understand why people are mad at Chastain. I didn't see anything that was obvious where he was running down low, realized Kyle Busch was coming, and then made an aggressive move. It just looked like he was running the line. I mean, look at what happened with, Matty D and Ryan Newman, Bristol a couple years ago. I mean, Matty D was trying to lap him and end up busting up his car, but a lot of fans were upset with Newman because of being Matty D. But I didn't really hear any drivers say anything bad. Even Matty D, although he was frustrated with Newman, even he wasn't calling him like a jerk or saying he did anything wrong. He's like, look, the guy's tough to pass. He wants to stay in the lead lap. You never know what's going to happen. So, I don't know. I can understand why Kyle Busch is frustrated. He had the win essentially right there. He knew once he got past, there was no way to get around him. Their cars, the front end, he mentioned it on the radio several times, they weren't going to be able to get by his brother. But, dude, it wasn't like this egregious move, in my opinion. I like it. And, look, I mean, what the teams do in NASCAR is nothing like what we see in other series like Formula One. I mean, they will give team orders for you to let the other guy pass because of points or better positions or whatever. You don't hear that. That's not allowed in NASCAR. So a little bit of team helping, it's like, why wouldn't they do that? That's smart to me. So I thought it was way overblown. I don't even think Chastain should get dumped for that. But that's just kind of my opinion.
Yeah, those two guys really were up the front, the Busch brothers, throughout the day. They stacked up the performance points in the DraftKings environment. But there were some guys that were in the optimal lineup that aren't there every week and are, I guess, in in the discussion, especially since they put themselves in good positions going on this weekend in New Hampshire. Those three guys that I would really want to mention are Matty D, Tyler Reddick, and Bubba Wallace. We talked about Bubba Wallace being in a position last week to potentially reach value, and he found himself in the optimal lineup. That team seems to have found some nice consistency here recently. They're trying to point their way in. If they can, they might be a contender to get a win at one of these tracks before the playoffs start. Daytona potentially. We'll see. But him, along with Reddick and Matty D, they both found themselves with solid days solid outings this past week, and they're set up nicely this week.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Reddick made it, and a little surprised Matty D made it. Not that we didn't like either of them, but we thought it would be a little hard given their position. But again, when you have one driver get 116 points, you don't have to do as much to reach the optimal. But I actually was high on Bubba Wallace. He was in quite a few of my lineups. I wasn't really that nervous to play him. I had felt like good confidence in him. And I also had a good amount of Alex Bowman too. And he got another top 5 at Atlanta. They're on a good run. Now we can, at least I feel comfortable saying, look, they're pretty solid in both the 550 and 750 instead of just the 750, which is what we saw early on in the year. I'm really interested to see what that team's able to do once the playoffs start. I feel like they are a dangerous team. I don't think they're going to be high on most people's radar because, Bowman and that team, they're not necessarily the most popular team right now. He's not the most popular driver. He has had one heck of a season, and he's putting together some really strong races at tracks we don't normally see. Obviously, we knew Atlanta was a good one for him. So for him to get in there and have, over a 6x value, that's a good showing for us from the DraftKings perspective. I kind of like him a little bit at New Hampshire too. We'll talk about him and see kind of where we both land on him. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a surprise with Matty D and Reddick making it. Things are kind of changing, man. It's not the normal guys we're used to seeing. I mean, there's some of these younger guys they're really starting to come into their own.
Yeah, and then we talk about those younger drivers, and we've got some news today about things getting shaken up a little bit. Talk a little silly season.
A little bit.
But yeah, we've got a new driver in the mix in the 21 ride taking over for Matty D, and that's Harrison Burton. It was kind of a surprise to some that he got the nod and got the opportunity to do that. So with that news, we were all expecting Austin Cindric to initially take that ride based on things leading up into the season. But as that news broke, we found out that Keselowski was no longer going to be in the 2. He is stepping away and going to most likely end up at Roush from everything that we've heard, and be part owner over there. So that opened up the 2 car, and Austin Cindric is now going to be the pilot of that car. Lots of younger talent coming in when we go racing in 2022, and that next-gen car is going to be exciting. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm not that surprised by Cindric in the 2, although I kind of thought maybe potentially they move Blaney to the 2, try to make him their next flagship driver and put Cindric in the 12. I kind of thought maybe they would do something like that. Wasn't sure. But for him to end up in the 2 is not that surprising because he was going to end up with Penske, 99.9% chance after Wood Brothers.
Because they do have that affiliation.
Of course.
They're
they were
basically
putting
tied
him
at the
there
hip.
until they figured out what was going to happen with Brad to begin with. I think it just happened a year earlier than they expected. But the Matty D news, it's not that surprising because he was supposed to be out of the ride regardless because of Cindric. But once the whole Brad news came out, I was like, well, he seems like it seemed like the fit was good with both him and the Wood brothers, although when you watch his video about the news today, you kind of realize it seems like there was definitely some issues within the organization trying to get everything aligned, which appears to be getting better. I mean, he just made the optimal. So, and he's been on a nice little heater. So I was kind of surprised that they went with this move, especially with it being Burton. I mean, he's a Toyota driver currently, Joe Gibbs. He was fairly solid at the end of last year, but some of those wins, if you kind of dissect them, I mean, he didn't just go out there and put it on everyone. He had I don't want to say luck. That's not the best word when it comes to racing. I don't know. I feel like personally with the races I've seen, especially this year, I feel like Burton could really use another year in Xfinity, especially with Cindric going to be gone. Someone's got to step up and be that next guy. You'd like it to be a Burton or maybe potentially a Gregson or something like that. He's already in Cup, man. I feel like we might see a little bit more of a, maybe this will be interesting to hear your take. Maybe it's like Anthony Alfredo, but in a little bit better equipment. I know he has a little bit more experience in Xfinity than Alfredo, but I mean, he has one Cup race this year. Wasn't the worst, wasn't the best. I don't know. Where are you kind of land on this Harrison Burton news?
It was interesting. I thought, based on some information I was reading throughout the last couple of weeks, that we'd see a younger driver potentially land there. I thought it might be Jeb Burton, but it ended up being Harrison. Made sense, and to me, I think he's got enough experience in the lower Xfinity series and being able to establish himself. He's got a lot more raw talent and experience than Alfredo to go towards your comparison there. So I think it's a solid move for Harrison Burton, especially.
Well, it's a great move for him.
No, I think it opens the door. I don't know if it was something, especially the thing that threw me was the manufacturer affiliation, because I'm looking at what he's got there at Gibbs and Toyota, Harrison Burton that is, and that's a great opportunity to be propelled into your future with that already, and for him to kind of go a different angle and go to a Ford sponsored team that he hasn't really got to dabble in before. I don't know if he was seeing some writing on the wall. Maybe it'd take him a little bit longer to get up to the Cup Series with the talent of Ty Gibbs this year being shown, that maybe he'll find himself in a Cup ride, and he's got insider track to that. So I don't know if that had anything to do with Harrison Burton's decision whenever this maybe presented itself. But there are it was kind of surprising, and I think a lot of people, especially Matty D fans out there, are kind of questioning, hey, why is he losing his ride to somebody like that? But
they're coming into a new car. A lot of things are going to change. No one really knows. Why wouldn't you want to have a veteran who's gone through the changes of the current gen car help get you, even if it's just for one more year, just kind of prep that car up a little bit more? And, for Burton, I forget where I heard this at, but I think Truex has a deal through the end of next year. But he wants to actually race the next gen car, because there's a chance, where he's at in his career. If he's said, from my understanding, if he doesn't like this car, he's just going to retire. That opens up the 19 with Joe Gibbs. That's a great car. You're right. With Ty Gibbs, maybe he just gets propelled into that. That's always there. But then you got 2311 maybe expanding. I feel like for Harrison Burton, one more year in Xfinity, especially with Cindric gone, that powerhouse gone, there's going to be kind of this dominator vacuum. Obviously, Dinger's still going to be racing in it, but he's had great races, but he's certainly looked vulnerable. I mean, Cindric for sure seems to me to be the best one in that series. So I don't know. I think it was just one of the silly season gets crazy. There's always changes, and maybe Matty D will end up in something even better. I just think this seems like a premature move on the Wood brothers' part, but you got to also consider Harrison Burton, I think, brings a little bit more funding with him, sponsorship with him compared to Matty D. And in this day and age, that can be the deciding factor. Talent doesn't always win. Money talks, So I think it could be a little bit of that 2 is what really made this truly happen. Seems weird, but I think we still have a few more dominoes to fall yet. We're still waiting on the official Brad K news and what they're going to do. 2-team operation. They expand to 3. I mean, there's still plenty of silly season to go.
Oh, yeah. We're just getting started. Just the summer months, things get to heat up in the silly season news. And, man, it was full swing this week with everything that was announced. And there's still, like you said, some dominoes to fall. Anything you want to touch on before we get into New Hampshire? Because we got a little bit to dissect there. It's going to be exciting on a mile long track this week.
Yeah, there's quite a few drivers that we're going to need to talk about. We'll do our best to get through as many as possible without getting too boring with it. There's probably plenty more we could talk about with all the changes for next year, but we got plenty of time to talk about it. We're coming into a nice little break here for NASCAR. We're getting essentially about 3 weeks off. I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward, and looking forward to it, and I'm sure a lot of these teams and drivers are as well. And when we come back, there's 4 races left to the playoffs, 2 of those being road courses, 1 being Daytona, and I think we got 4 spots currently right now for drivers in on points. Who knows? I mean, we're still right there in that bubble. Like, do we get
best season ever?
It's wild. I could easily see like a Chase Briscoe going out and getting the Indy road course, and maybe Bubba Wallace, maybe a guy like Eric Jones, who we haven't talked about at all, hitting Daytona. He's been good there too. You don't have to have the best equipment at Daytona to win that race. There's still a few drivers that could sneak their way in that we are not expecting.
And don't we have Michigan somewhere in there too? So that's a 2-miler that we could have an unexpected winner at as well, based on some strategy. We could see a place where Denny Hamlin might not get in. Like, there's so much stuff that is left to play out.
I would say more than likely Hamlin should still make it unless we were to get 5 new winners. I don't see that happening. I think Chase or Truex, maybe Larson takes Watkins Glen. That seems most likely. But I think we're staring at Kevin Harvick not making it in. He does not have those points that Denny Hamlin has. He does not have that cushion. He's really solid at Michigan, but do we see him of old there,
I think this could be something we talk about maybe in a future episode, but maybe we get a little bit of time in this off break and come back and talk more about that, because there's a lot of scenarios that are left to play out before the playoffs really.
I mean, there's even a rumor going around that this could be Harvick's last year. He retires. That would be wild. So yeah, we'll have to get into that. Give you some to think about over the nice long break until NASCAR comes back. But we do have one more race, and I think we should talk about it. There's a lot of laps, so performance is certainly key here. Let's see. Let me pull up the do you have the track information handy?
Yeah, New Hampshire Motor Speedway is it's a 1.058 miles, so just over a mile long track, and it's a 301 lap event, so 318 miles roughly. So there are, with it being 301 laps, there are 210.7 potential playoff point or potential performance points available. So with the amount of laps that are going into it, there are potential for a dominator or two, like we saw a little bit last week. The stages are 75, 110, and 116, and the previous track winner is Brad K. So he finds himself in an interesting position along with some other drivers this week. And when we look at the top of the salary board, no really surprise to us right now. We'll start seeing some week-to-week differences. We might not see Kyle Larson at the top like we are again this week.
And then just real quick to add to that, we will obviously get a competition caution somewhere probably lap 35 or so. So just because you're at the front early on does not mean you're always going to be there. And there's some good drivers who are starting back just a few spots, but they are good at this track, and they've got some good speed in this package. Kyle Larson could be one of those. He's got a little PD upside this week. I don't know. What's your sort of initial gut? Because my initial gut's like 11-2. That's doable. It's not ridiculous. But I feel like maybe backing off Larson this week might be the move. He's kind of again, just like last week, it's kind of, you decide on what to do with him, and then you go from there.
Yeah, I think based on his price tag, it's I wouldn't mind rostering him if I'm going to start there, like you said. I'm going to do that, and I'm going to look at it and see how I can build some lineups. I've already kind of done it, so to me, I don't want to go overboard on him. I think there's enough value with some of these lower or other drivers, and we see a lot better stats consistently throughout the season with some of these other drivers in the 750 horsepower package. This is going to be a race. I feel that strategy is not going to play in the mix all that much. The fastest car is going to be probably the car to beat. The last year we saw the two fastest cars finish 1 and 2. That's probably where we're going to be at again. I think this style of track just lends itself to that style of racing. So I don't want to miss the boat. And that's what I'm saying with Kyle Larson. I do want to have exposure, but I just don't think he's going to be my cash guy this week.
Yeah, it's tough because we know he has the ability to get, past 9 drivers and just drive off and leave everyone. I think, I don't have it in front of me, but I believe Brad Keselowski led like 178, 180 laps in the last race. He led over half of them. I know that. And then it was just kind of diced up between a few other drivers. If he does that, then he's obviously the guy to beat. We looking at his stats a little bit. He's certainly up there. It's not his best track, but in his last 4 races here, he has 2 top 5s. Average finish is 12.3 in those 4 races, but he's getting 21 and a half fastest laps, and of course that is or was in Chip Ganassi equipment. So it's certainly, you can certainly make a case for a Larson domination, but I think, like you said earlier, I think Penske and Gibbs might be the teams this week.
Yeah, and going through our garage thoughts, which is our spreadsheet, if you will, with a lot of different data points. We've got that available on our Patreon. That link's below, but go check it out. We reference a lot of data. This data I'm looking at specifically here is the 2021 short tracks, and that consists of Darlington, Nashville, Dover, Phoenix, Richmond, that Bristol dirt race, and Martinsville. So that's 7 total races. Kyle Larson's average finish in those is 9.1. So that's where I'm saying, hey, he's got the ability. He does have a win at Nashville earlier in the year, and that's a 1.3 mile track, a little bit longer. This is a flat track, which is going to be fun to watch. It's an exciting place to race, get good action there. So I just think.
But in those short tracks, you got to give him credit. 9.1, you're right, but he does have 1 win. He has 4 top 5s, and he's averaging almost 50 fastest laps and over 75 laps led average. Now, of course, some are going to be a little more skewed, but he ain't no slouch. I mean, he's one of the best as far as performance points of anyone other than 2 of the Gibbs drivers, who are also pretty solid. So I feel like you can. He's one of those guys you can make the case against him, which I feel like I'm leaning towards right now, but you can easily make a case for him.
Yeah, and I look at the 750 horsepower data too, and he's got overall out of the 11 races so far that has been ran in that package, he's got a negative place differential of 4.5 in this package. So it's not as consistent as he's been in the 550 if you're looking at it from that angle.
Right. Now, the other Kyle Busch, he's pretty solid here. In the last 5 at New Hampshire, not the best average finish, 12.2, which is 0.1 better than Larson. But he does have a win, and he has 2 top 5s in those 5 races, 3 top 10s, over 45 fastest laps, and 87.2 laps led on average in those races. He starts second. He starts first. Where are you thinking Kyle Busch is going to land this week?
I think it's going to be him and Larson. To me, are very similar. Except Larson has a little bit more upside with place differential. We're looking for Kyle Busch to be able to be that one dominator that gets out and leads a lot of laps. But looking at his recent data in this package and then at short tracks throughout this year that we just kind of talked about with Kyle Larson, his data is worse than Larson's, quite a bit worse in this package and on these style of tracks. And that's kind of concerning because those two have been the best in the 550 without question. But talking about some of the other Gibbs drivers and Team Penske in the 750 setup, I think they find themselves with an easier path to value and potentially better outcomes. So I do want a little bit of exposure because I think that Kyle Busch has been really on a heater. I think they found something. I knew it was going to be happening at some point, but I don't know if this is with that price tag and that position. He would really have to get out there and dominate to pay his price tag. But man, I don't want to miss the boat either. So I definitely want to have him. I just don't know if he's my cash game go-to.
Tech's going to be interesting. If one of these guys goes to the rear, then it's going to change things up quite a bit. Not that they can't. There's plenty of laps they can get back up to the front. But in my opinion, to kind of spoil it a little bit, I think Truex is sort of my favorite sort of main dominator. He starts second next to Kyle Busch. That is sort of Busch's biggest risk early on from getting those kind of cheap laps led. If he's able to take Truex, keep him in second or behind him, he's going to lead those first 35 laps more than likely. That's good. I'm sure he's going to get some fastest laps. Coming out of the pits, he might even lead some more. I think eventually Truex is going to be the guy that overtakes him. Maybe Hamlin. Maybe we see some other guys we'll get into. That's sort of where I'm landing at with Kyle Busch. It's like if he's able to stay out front and get those early laps led, he's probably going to hang around a top 5 finish. It might be enough for it to be worth it. Maybe he goes a little lower owned, and maybe he should because he's starting first. That's kind of where I'm at with Kyle Busch this week. But I am I'm kind of like you. I'm a little apprehensive about wanting to just go full on him because his teammates are really strong here.
Yeah, I think he's a fantastic GPP play. I just think there's other value to be had for some cash games situations. So that's where I'm at.
So our first real big PD play is William Byron. He comes in at 10-6, and he's starting 16th. That team has really struggled the last few weeks when you kind of start breaking down the results. Some of it's just bad NASCAR luck. When you go on, 10, 11, 12, whatever top 10 streak that he had early on, you're kind of due for a little bit of a skid. I'm not too concerned with him. I think he can still have a pretty nice playoff run, but you definitely want to see him get it back into the swing of things. Before then, I think needs to happen a little bit this week. Not obviously, we've mentioned this almost every week, not the best track data here, but he's been mostly outperforming that. We kind of disagreed when we were building projections a little bit on Byron. Not much, but a little bit. I think I like him a little bit more than you. What's sort of your reason for not being real high on a kind of a soft pricing on a guy with what he's done this year? That's nice PD upside.
Yeah, I just the price tag is the number one concern for me is 10,600. I think there's some other guys below that just offer a lot of value potential for cash game builds. I think William Byron's great tournament play. Once again, I think he has what you're looking for on short track action this year. 7 starts, 7 top 10s, and 4 top 5s. He's been consistent in that. But is it going to be enough to reach value with such a high price tag starting only 16th? If he was maybe 20th or so, that might have been a little bit more of me wanting to roster him. But at that, it's just going to be a little bit less enticing for me to want to play unless I'm doing those GPP tournaments.
7 races on short tracks and 7 top 10s with an average of 5.1. Pretty strong. Not the most performance points. 12 fastest laps, a little over 4 laps led on average. Obviously, you'd like to see those numbers up a little bit, but the 4th best driver, according to driver rating, for short tracks. He is ahead of 2 of his teammates immediately, Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott. He's also ahead of Harvick and Blaney and Bowman, and we already kind of talked about it, Kyle Busch. He's been really strong. I think this is a spot he could do really well. But again, does that kind of skid continue? I could see it happening again another week, and then maybe going into this break, kind of regrouping, coming back, getting that momentum back. I like Byron. I know I will be playing him some unless we get news that he's going to the rear. Then that will kind of kill it for me a little bit. But to me, I think Byron is a solid play. But we'll wait for the race on Sunday. The next guy, do you have anything else about Byron? Because I think the next guy is someone we don't really have a lot to say, but you have to mention him, and that's Harvick.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I just think that team's in a weird place. I don't want really too much exposure, if any, until I start to see a little bit more consistency out of them. And it's just been so up and down here recently. And he does have good stats in some areas, but it's just not enough to make me feel comfortable because Denny Hamlin's right there. And I think that's more of a go-to than Harvick at this point in the season. How about you?
Well, so obviously we've documented his stats. Everyone knows by this point, Harvick is not Harvick this year. Cool. But in the last 5 races, he has 2 wins and 4 top 5s at this track. Average is 9.6 finish, but 2 wins in 5 races, that is strong. Decent performance points. He's getting almost 21 laps led and almost 21 fastest laps and 12 laps led. 5th best driver according to driver rating. So you do get a little PD upside with Harvick. I would imagine there's a lot of people probably not really excited to play Harvick at this point until they see something from him. Maybe this is a spot to get Harvick at a low ownership. Nice solid GPP play. Fords have been really strong at this track lately. I mean, Brad, he won the most recent race here in the Ford. I don't know, man. I'm kind of like you. I don't have a ton to say about him.
He does have 4 career wins here, which is the most by any active driver, which automatically you'll think of Kevin Harvick, and we thought of him at Atlanta last week. And
well, you mentioned it about Kurt Busch last week. I mean, he was tied with Harvick at 3 career wins, and he picked up his 4th. We didn't really see that coming from him, and then he just goes out and dominates. So those sort of things can happen. Again, it's not like a super crystal clear, like, oh, yeah, I could really see that happening, but it's certainly there. But I am kind of with you when we get down to this area. The last guy in the 10K and above price range is Denny Hamlin. He starts 6th, potentially one of the best drivers on this slate, in my opinion. I already kind of said Truex was probably my favorite, but how are you feeling about Hamlin? I know you like him a little more than Harvick.
Yeah, I think he's in a great position starting 6th. That price tag at $10,000 is nice, but you look at the 2021 data, short track and 750 horsepower packages, and he's at the top in almost every category. That's strong. He has 5 top 5 finishes in 7 attempts on short tracks this season, and he's just really, really strong in this package. He averages almost 50 laps led in this package, so it is something where if he has an opportunity, like I said, I think Gibbs, him, and Truex, like you've mentioned, are in fantastic spots this week. I think they're going to be kind of chalky, but it's going to be fun to kind of see if some of these Penske drivers might be able to unseat him as well.
Well, you said he's averaging basically 50 laps led in this package. He's also averaging almost 52 laps led here at this track. He's got a win in the last 5. He's got 3 top 5s. He has not finished outside of the top 15. He's got an average finish of 6th here. Really strong. been great for you from DK perspective. Certainly usable in just about any race. I think Hamlin is a great play. You're right. He probably will be highly owned, rightfully so. They are kind of clicking again. They kind of skidded back, but I think they're kind of dialing it in. I would imagine they get a win at some point this year, not guaranteed. I really like Hamlin this week, which is not something we've been saying a ton lately. I think he's a great option. Someone I'm kind of scared to roster is Chase Elliott this week. 9,800. He starts third. This is not a terrible track for him. Hendrick, as we've documented, been very, very strong this year, especially the last 12, 15 races. I just see him just not doing too much. Maybe still getting another top 10, which is great, but maybe doing well in the stages. But as far as a DK perspective, I feel like it's not a complete fade because he can pay off that price tag without doing too much. But I think it's a little, I don't know. I think you got to go a little light on Elliott. Are you taking a different approach with him?
I could see it going either way, but I think I'm more in line with what your train of thought is, because looking at the overall data and the short track action hasn't been where he's had the greatest success this year. He's only got 3 top 5s out of the 7 attempts. It's strong, but that's less than half the time, obviously, when we're talking about some other drivers already above him and some below him that will have better data to back them up and have been more consistent in this this kind of setting. So I don't think I want to go too heavy on him, especially with some place differential plays right below him.
Well, let's get into those guys. Logano would be next on the board. He starts 15th. He's 9,500. Been pretty solid on the 750. This is what this team is, and this organization is really focusing on. Driver rating wise, he's the second best driver in the 11 750 horsepower package races. Average finish is 5.8, which is the best I can see. He has the win, albeit the dirt race, but that's still impressive. 7 top 5s in 11 races. They have not been doing very well, and even in some of the more recent 750s have not been performing quite where we'd like to see them. Did not do what we were hoping he'd do at Road America, because we both had exposure to him, and this really wasn't that pretty. But I think this is a track that he can get it done at. What's your opinion on Logano this week in that 22 team?
Well, I think if it has any indication, we've got him placed in the middle of our display here on the table, and I think based on everything we looked at, we gave him a checkered flag in our race guide for a reason as well. Go check out that race guide, by the way. It has a lot of good information to go along with what we've talked about here. Again, we've got some core lineup builds and some player pools and a lot of other information, but that download link's in the description below, so please go check that out if you've got time. But yeah, Logano, I think, finds himself in a fantastic position with that place differential and that price tag. It's a fantastic combination of the both. And then you go and dissect his data, and it's fantastic, especially on the short tracks. He's got 4 top 5s out of the 7 races. He does have that win. He's got the second best average finish, just behind William Byron, surprisingly. So that's strong. And then he's just good and finds himself in positions on these style of tracks more often than not to be there at the end to win. He might fade at times, but hopefully with that place differential, it's enough to get there if he doesn't dominate.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate just a little bit with Logano, because I'm right there with you. He's one of our sort of best rated drivers going into this week. But the hesitation with Logano would be average of 13.8 finish in the last 5 races at New Hampshire. No wins, 1 top 5, 4 top 10s. Performance points, 5 fastest laps, 0.2 laps led. He's not getting laps led. And overall, he's the 9th best driver, according to driver rating, in that race span. Not been the strongest track. He's won at this track before. I believe this is he considers his home track. So there's always that extra little element. We got that last week at Atlanta with Chase. He led laps early, but and ultimately still ended up having a decent day, but wasn't really usable from a DraftKings perspective. That would kind of be my devil's advocate with Logano. It's the data is there to support it for this year. I would expect it, but if we look at this track, it's not like really any other track on the NASCAR circuit. With the size that it is, the banking that it lacks, it's somewhat unique. There's no other track to really say, oh, this is the kind of sister track to New Hampshire. We don't have that. So it could be another race that Logano underperforms, but personally, I'm on your side that he should do very well this week.
Yeah, and I think Brad Keselowski finds himself in a very similar situation, 9,300, starting 11th. He has that path to value with the place differential. He seems to find great ways to get towards the front in these wacky races, weird tracks that he seems to do well at. He did well at this track last year with that win. This could be a place where you could pivot off of Logano for that place differential, maybe even try to fit them in lineups together. It's going to be fun to build some lineups, but I do like Brad Keselowski. He's got good, strong data in some of this that we've looked at, and some of the data on the short track stuff is not that enticing too. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. That's why I definitely lean Logano versus Brad K, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Brad K have a decent day.
And this was something when we started getting ready for this week, compiling the stats that we want to put in our garage thoughts. I pulled just the last 3 races, so that would be Atlanta, Road America, and the second Pocono race. This was surprising. I didn't realize this because, when you're watching on TV, you can see a lot that they don't show you, but you're still pretty limited. Brad, over these last 3 races, has the 5th overall best average finish. Kyle Busch, his average finish is 2. I mean, he's got the win. I mean, he's been right there. He's obviously the best. Reddick is tied for second with Martin Truex at an average finish of 7.7. Kurt Busch, 8.3. And then Brad, 8.7. Brad's teammate Ryan Blaney would be 6th at 10.3. So he's kind of, there's a fairly big difference there. Brad is a guy I think that maybe is not on a lot of people's radar, but he dominated this race last year in the 750 horsepower package. I'm like you. I kind of like Logano because you get 4 extra place differential spots, but you're right. He kind of, these semi-wacky races, Brad finds his way up to the front, maybe leads the laps or gets a nice solid top 3. That's good for you.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up that you don't always get the full coverage when you're watching the race, and there's definitely a lot of stuff that you should go back and look at after the race to kind of find some of these hidden nuggets. We try to put together our slate review so you can see some of that, and that's something we put out weekly. But also things that I noticed as well, and the next driver on the list, Martin Truex, he was catching Kyle Busch at the end of that race last week and didn't get the mention that he needed to. And that team's actually been very strong. You just pointed out the last 3 races that they've kind of been putting things together. And we get him at a huge discount starting second, $9,100. I'm looking at him to be potentially the dominator of this race early. I think he could get out in front of his teammate Kyle Busch potentially off the start. He's got the solid data in the 750 horsepower package that we're in this week, and then fantastic data on the short tracks. He's got 3 wins out of the 7 races at short tracks. Man, I won a lot of Martin Truex this week.
So if you didn't check out our slate review or do your own diving into the results at Atlanta, based on the coverage, you would not know that Truex had 20 fastest laps. It was 3rd best. Obviously, Kurt Busch, number 1, 62. Kyle Busch had 40. But yeah, Truex was right there. He went to the rear of the field. So at that point, it was like off of him completely. But he still had a solid day. He still was over 5X. Didn't make the optimal, but would have still have helped your lineups. He wouldn't have been a complete killer like a few other drivers were last week. He was quiet. You know, start fifth, start at the rear of the field, and find your way in third. Real impressive from that team, especially after the kind of long, lengthy debate we had about him. It's like you need to see something from this team. We're not seeing it. And part of why we're not seeing it is a little bit of the coverage, obviously, because these numbers are decent. He gets a good, solid run here. That team is back as the top 2 favorite to win the championship, in my opinion. But I still want to see them actually get out front and lead some and flex on everyone before I put them back in that category. Things are getting weird, you know. Larson seems to be kind of cooling down a little bit, and maybe now we're starting to see Truex come out of his little cool down and pick it back up. Things are getting real interesting towards the end of this regular season.
Yeah, we've got some interesting drivers in the next group with Daniel Suarez, Ryan Blaney, and Kurt Busch. Those guys are all 3 different plays, and they're in weird positions. Daniel Suarez didn't have the greatest week last week. His day ended early.
Hurt me.
Wasn't what everybody was looking for, but he's priced up drastically, starting 31st. There's a path to value there for sure. It's going to be difficult driving through the field. This is kind of a track position race, but it's not impossible, and he's had solid equipment to do that. I just want some other drivers, I think, a little bit lower down on the pricing to really get the right mix of the drivers at the top, and I don't know if Daniel Suarez allows that. And Ryan Blaney and Kurt Busch, in my opinion, they're both in very similar plays, and they don't really have the data in this package and on the short tracks to really make me feel confident at that price tag and where they're starting to be able to reach value very easily. So that's my thought on those guys.
Yeah, I think it comes down to how you want to construct your lineups. And when I'm looking lower down on the pricing sheet, I'm not seeing a ton of obvious, great, cheap value plays. I think you can get a few, but I mean, personally, I don't. If you're going to dumpster dive and you go cheap, I think you go all the way down towards the bottom to cram in as many guys up top as you can this week, because I don't know if these 5.5 to 6.5 guys, I don't really know if they're really going to pay off. They cost too much. Lots of ways to construct the lineups. What were you going to say?
So you're saying maybe going back to the half barrel where you go down to the very bottom and then kind of try to build some other ones, or are you trying to look at some more balanced lineups? Because I would
rather go balanced this week if I can, but it's like if you're going to try to go cheap, because you're going to want to try to get some of these higher price guys. So, if you try to do a Hamlin, Logano, Truex kind of build, you're going to have to get, several 6K drivers. I don't know if I want several 6K drivers. I think I'd rather have maybe 2 7K and then go down to the bottom to squeeze that last one out, because, we'll talk about, I'm going to jump the gun a little bit, but I hate saying it. It's always risky, but I like Stenhouse a lot this week. I know you do too. I mean, $7,100, but I think he's in a great spot. So you get a guy like him, or you pay for a guy like maybe Newman, Chastain's another one that might get in there. You go those guys, you're going to end up having to go really cheap. So I don't want to pay $5,600 for Cody Ware or something like that. To me, that just doesn't make sense. So it's like if you're going to go cheap this week, you probably go all the way towards the bottom.
It's going to be interesting because there's not a lot of value in this $8,000 range that I'm seeing. I think Eric Almirola and Alex Bowman are 2 potential for completely different reasons. Alex Bowman's been hit or miss, but you've talked about how strong he's been in certain situations. And then I think Eric Almirola.
Yep.
And get that and Alex Bowman going at the same time. Eric Almirola.
Too many A's.
You didn't even get past C in this combination. It's AA and AB. So Eric Almirola, I think he's somebody that has some strong data at New Hampshire. He's been a little bit more consistent in the 750 horsepower package, even though it's not been fantastic. It's going to be somebody I want to have some exposure to for sure, because I think it might be the right time to get him with this price tag, but I don't want to go overboard by any stretch of the imagination.
So my opinion kind of on Bowman is he has 2 wins on short tracks this year. He won at Dover and he won at Richmond. Those are short tracks, so they're similar, and he's run well in those. I think when you look at recent data, it really shows more of a Gibbs, Penske sort of domination at this track. But if there's a guy from Chevy, and more specifically Hendrick, that's going to do it this week, in my opinion, I think Alex Bowman is that guy that creeps in there. I like him a little bit more than Larson, just for the fact that he really has kind of come through with the wins on these tracks. I think he's a good play. Now, when we look at Amarola, his data is not great on short tracks, but we go over to the last 5 at New Hampshire. It's pretty decent. He has 1 top 5, 2 top 10s, average 14.2, averaging 15.2 fastest laps and 11.2 laps led. Kind of mentioned earlier, Ford has done really well here at New Hampshire. I think this is kind of a spot you can play Amarola. Don't love it this year, but you just got to roll the dice.
Yeah, it's the place differential that I'm looking at, and then he does have a top 5 and a couple top 10s in this package, which if you look at the 550, you don't see anything that shines. So if there is an opportunity for him to do it, I think this week is a fine time to take that risk and roster him. Looking at a couple other drivers, you've talked about the Gibbs and Penske drivers kind of falling into it. I think we've skipped a couple drivers and go down to Bell and the Penske-related Matty D car. He's been on a heater. Bell, I think, finds himself in a great play. He's won here twice in Xfinity. Could be a little bit of under-the-radar play because he's starting 9th. He could be a great value because he doesn't have to really pass as many cars. So I look to him maybe to have a decent day. And Matty D, I think, with that 14th place starting position, he's got some upside. So I want some exposure to both of those in tournament plays. Maybe Bell in a cash game if I look at it and I'm able to build a strong lineup with him in there comfortably.
Yeah, he doesn't need to do a whole lot to reach value, but you still need him to do something because he is starting 9th, so there's not a ton of PD unless, of course, he pulls a Kurt Busch like last week and really just goes out and dominates, which is possible. I mean, in that Gibbs equipment, they've been really good here. So with those 2 wins in Xfinity, I can certainly see that happening. I would have, I'd be a little cautious, obviously, playing him in a cash game scenario, but I think GPP is great. And I don't really know if there's going to be that many people on Bell other than people who are actually doing their homework and looking kind of back at his Xfinity stats and everything. When it comes to Matty D, obviously a pretty emotional week for him, for that whole team. I know they're going to go out and they're going to try to finish the season strong. I know he really wants to get that 100th win for Wood Brothers. I hope he gets it this year. I don't know if it comes at a track like New Hampshire. They haven't been as good in the 750 as the 550, but he's been really good in both packages on his restarts. He's improving his positions. He's not losing a lot of spots. That's going to help that team if they can keep it clean in the pits. I think he can really do something. He has a path to value. It's not the easiest, but I think he can do it. And I think he's a nice pivot off of some of these more popular guys that people are likely to go to. So I think he's a fine play, but it's hard to say that he's like a lock by any means. It's certainly a GPP play for Matty D, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we kind of touched on these drivers, Newman, Stenhouse, and Chastain earlier. They're all place differential plays and find themselves in strong spots. I think Stenhouse has the best upside out of all of them, and then he's strong in the 750 horsepower package, so that's where I'm going. But I wouldn't mind having some exposure to Chastain as well. I think Newman's just a little bit too highly priced.
Yeah, I agree. And Newman's just been in spots we liked him before and didn't perform at all. So it's more of a risk with Newman. Stenhouse, they need a good, strong run. I think they can do it. But he is known by many in the DFS community as Wrecky Stenhouse. So there's always that risk there. Other than last week, Chastain has been on a nice little heater. Obviously, his teammate dominated at Atlanta. He's been good in 750 horsepower package tracks. I think Chastain's in a nice spot. I think he could be good. We'll see if he gets any payback. I doubt it, but it's always a little bit of a risk there. But I think, honestly, it's risky because there's not the PD there, but Reddick has been on a tear. He's 6,800. He starts 8th, and they're on the cusp of getting a win. I don't necessarily see it happening this week. I don't even know if it happens before the playoffs. Right now, it seems like that team's strategy is to go out and maximize points. They're not being overly aggressive. They're not taking these huge swings. It seems like they're going out there. They're trying to get a solid first and second stage and then just get the best possible finish that they can without coming in and doing crazy, pitting early or pitting late or doing 2 tires instead of 4. They're not doing those kind of things. They're playing guys straight up, and they're getting top 10s. They're doing really well, even starting in the top 10, finishing in the top 10. Like that's good from a team like that. And with that Chevy power, he could be a little dangerous. I could see him running well, maybe even running in the top 5 for a while. I think Reddick, he is risky in that 8th starting spot, but I think he's pretty solid. What's your thoughts on Reddick?
I like Reddick. I think he's trying to point his way into the playoffs, and with that comes that strategy you just talked about, and we look for guys in those situations to have strong days, and if he is able to get a top 10, that's pretty much 5x value at that price tag. I really do think he's a guy you want to look at in some cash game scenarios and definitely in tournament plays.
Well, now we kind of get into these guys that there's not a ton that I like this week. Eric Jones would be next. He's 6,700, starts 24th. He's got he's close. He's on that cusp of 5X. If he just kind of hits some averages, I think he's in play. But with that equipment, always a little bit of a risk. I think Bubba Wallace is also in play. When he's starting 18th at 6,500. If he's able to get a let's call it 15th place finish, pick up a few fastest laps, he's going to be over 5X. I think he can pair well with some of these other drivers. They've been on a tear. Once we start getting below that, personally, that's when I start getting a little worried about these guys hitting value. Where are you kind of landing on Jones or Wallace this week?
Yeah, I think I want to have a little bit of both because they do offer some upside. They might not have the best stats, but I know Bubba Wallace is outperforming a little bit more than his recent history has shown. So I do want some exposure there. Not overboard by any stretch of the imagination, but yeah, you're right. Below that, it's very difficult to find value this week. I think Michael McDowell would be somebody to take a look at, but it's very, very touch and go based on his 750 horsepower data. They don't seem to have as much success there, but after that, you're really kind of taking a huge risk. But if it makes it work for your lineup, you could go there in some GPP plays. We talked about maybe Half or Haley or someone there at that bottom price tier to potentially, if we get a couple guys that wreck out, might provide an opportunity to reach value because they're so priced so low. But Again, we very rarely want to go there, and I don't know if I'm really wanting to stoop to that low this week.
Yeah, I think you just kind of plug some of these guys in if you need to. If you have the money for McDowell, you can certainly play that. Possibly Briscoe. LaJoy's there. I think he's a guy that's also kind of on that cusp. He could certainly play out. But none of these guys I'm in really high on this week. Be sure to check out the race guide for the impact scores and watch our race day rundown for a little bit more about these guys. But there's really nothing else I think to really say about this slate. It's gonna be it's gonna be fun to build lineups this week, but we have a different challenge than what we had at Atlanta. I think we got a lot of good sort of mid-price guys, right around that 10, 8.5 to sort of 10 or 9 to 10 range that we really have to pick between, and then maybe a few of these high-price guys. So I don't know what exactly we're going to get this week with New Hampshire. I think it's going to be fun. I know a lot of guys are, like I said earlier, they're looking forward to this break. What's your last little thoughts on New Hampshire? Who do you think? Who's your pick to win this race? If we just have to call it straight up, who do you think is going to end up taking the checkered?
I'm going to go with Martin Truex Jr. I think he's going to right the ship. I think they get everything put together. They've been a little bit quicker, and then he can win at a non-playoff track. I've said it's not really their priority, but I think they've kind of done enough here, and he's finds himself in a decent enough spot. I think they should be able to get it done. How about you?
My pick is actually probably Truex as well. But if I'm gonna go with the second guy to just be a little different from you, I'd say it's probably his teammate Denny Hamlin.
Yeah.
They just seem like everything's right there for him. I don't know. We'll see what we get.
Yeah, well, you mentioned we're getting ready to hit a break, so we definitely appreciate everybody out there that's watched us up to this point. We are excited to have you along. If you like the content that you just watched, please hit that subscribe button. Also, since we're going to be in a break, whenever we do come back, or if we're able to put out an episode in the break, make sure that subscribe button's hit and the notifications are on so that you get that whenever we do release it, you'll get that quick notification that we have a new video out. Everybody that's listening on the podcast, thank you. We've seen a great big uptick in our podcast downloads. We definitely appreciate that. It's something that we truly do like to see whenever everybody's together. So whenever we are in that situation, go over to Twitter and let us know what you have to say, because that's one way we stay engaged with y'all, and we'd like to see that constant interaction there, and definitely love to see the winning lineups on race day as well. But we've got a lot of other content in our descriptions below. We do a lot of different things throughout the week to kind of help prepare, and we put it all together in that one place for you to take a look at and go ahead and download whenever you get the opportunity. But for anything else, man, I'm excited to kind of get the action underway. I don't have anything else to say except for we'll see you next time. I'm Joe, that's Jeremy, and this is the DK Garage.